Welcome to Ask Colleen, Spiritual Solutions for Life Situations. I'm Colleen St.Michaels, and I will be the host for this podcast. My aim is to provide you with the guidance and support through life's challenges, spiritual development, change, healing, and growth. Drawing from over 2 decades of experience as a spiritual practitioner, I will share my wisdom and offer answers to the questions that may weigh heavy on your heart and your mind. Remember that you are not alone, you are capable, and the light within you is unstoppable. Hello and welcome to Ask Colleen. I am Colleen St.Michaels and welcome back. If you're new here, welcome aboard. So I hope everybody has been having a lovely week and practicing some of the shielding practices that we've talked about in the past episodes, where we are shielding and protecting our energy to help preserve, protect, and expand our vibration to become more intuitively clear, more intuitively aligned, and more comfortable in the skin suit that we're carrying through our earth walk. So we're going to start off with our angel card pull from my Peace Warrior guidance deck. And let's see and set our intention for the week coming forward. So just in your mind, just set an intention. And I'm just going to ask a question of our teams of light, of angels, and our loved ones cross to just help guide us and let us know what the message is. The card is the pages in between. Create the story you want to read. Such a powerful card because often we are living the pages of a story that we are thought to live from previous events or thoughts that we had from when we were younger, and we just put ourselves on this trajectory of thinking like, okay, so I started it, so I have to finish it till it's done. But in the reality of how we spiritually grow and evolve, not everything is meant to be so definitive. Not everything is meant to be such a hard line. And when we can allow ourselves to detach from the attachment of what we thought it should be, or what our thoughts are, it should be this way, it should be this way, we're now blocking ourselves from actually receiving the next coordinate that's coming through our intuitive impressions. So if you're finding yourself in this place where you're having dreams that you want change, but you're holding so tightly onto what is and grappling with what was and fighting yourself for what you thought it should be, I ask you just to take a pause and just breathe. Because the ego is running rampant at that moment. The ego is just amplifying all of the data that you've kept within your mental space for all of this time. And it's telling you like, oh, it's not supposed to be like this. So these new intuitive impressions that are coming through are often deflected because there's no space within that left hemisphere, which we hold the logic, where it can expand and grow. So I ask you just to kind of close your eyes, take a breath, and be open or willing to be willing. I will read you something that really inspired me this past week. And I'm always looking for things that inspire me to just make my awareness greater, bigger, and more expanded. And nature often is that piece for me that expands me, where I go out into nature and it's forever changing. It lives instinctually. And, I don't see birds fighting with themselves because, they should have built their nest here, but they built it here. And, we allow ourselves to be so polluted with all of our expectations of ourselves that are really not in alignment with our soul. Our expectations externally were really set up because we were watching other people do things. We were seeing how things were done previously. So we set these expectations up for us, and then we diminish our own belief in ourselves. We diminish what is possible for us. So I want to share this. This was a poem that was written by Marianne Williamson, and I just found it to be incredibly inspiring. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, or fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest and live in the glory that is within us. It is not just some of us, it is in everyone. And when we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Like, wow, isn't that amazing? Such a powerful statement, a testimony that our soul was meant to shine. And as you're going through this buffing process to become this illumination in your life, often we stumble. We let that fear tarnish our light. We let outside experiences tarnish our light. We allow, and we are the ones who are doing it. And we are the ones that can shift it. I always tell my clients, because I told myself a million times, I created a lot of the shit shows that I was in. So I was pretty powerful in creating. And we can laugh about that because you know what? I created it. I have the power to fix it. So when we can get that mindset in our heart and in our being and really start living it, well, if I had the energy to create this situation, then if I just kind of pivot and generate energy in another direction, then that is the healing remedy. That is, and taking responsibility for that. And that's what's going to lead us into this talk today, because we're going to talk about the shadow work. And light is information and darkness is lack of information. So the light within us is creating a space where when it shines on those aspects of ourselves that are hurting or have been ignored or have been silenced because we don't want to feel it, or we're not shown how to feel it, or we don't know how to feel it, the light allows us to shrink the shadow when we give attention and love to it. No matter what phase you are on your journey of light work, you will do shadow work. It is not just for the beginning phases. It is not just for the newbies in the awakened world. We are all on a journey of growth and expansion. So we are all always doing shadow work, because with every veil that's lifted, it then exposes a different perspective of how we can see an enlightened world. So what is shadow work? Shadow work is a practice of exploring all parts of ourself, discovering and investigating what lies in the unconscious shadows and bringing it into consciousness. Someone once asked me, what is enlightenment? And I love the answers that the angels gave, because they said enlightenment is bringing light into consciousness. It is lightening your load of all the density and the heaviness that you're holding on to, and you're creating an enlightened environment. So it's releasing the density to let the light and the airiness of life surface. Because when we are in that very dense space, we are in the space where we are trying to force and to grind through it. There's a lot of resistance in that space. But when we're shining the light in it and we expose those parts of us and we embrace and accept and transmute those parts of us that are hurting, we then create a lightness and an airiness, and we walk in the world of flow, where force is not necessary, where we understand the alignment of our life to our experiences. And we'll talk about it in future episodes, how when we get stuck in energy and we experience loops in the energy, how to navigate through that. But as we are talking about the shadow and the different aspects of the shadow, so your shadow self is as specific to you as your fingerprints. Your shadows were formed throughout your lifespan, but mainly influenced through your early years. Carl Jung is a psychologist of many years ago who was the first pioneer in shadow work. And if you're not familiar with his work, I would highly suggest looking him up, because he's pretty interesting, and it's also very inspiring that here we have a doctor of that time span. I'm not even going to quote what years he was practicing, but his belief system around the shadow is just so fascinating. And it really is what has been a pioneer in creating the psychological aspect of shadow work, and with the spiritual, communication, and bringing those two pieces together. So it's quite fascinating. So when we're doing shadow work, it's a self-reflection exercise where you're working through the darker, the hidden parts of yourself. And we all have them. So when I say, our dark side, I'm not talking about like, Star Wars, like Darth Vader. I'm talking about the parts of us, just like we all have dark rooms in our homes. Well, this is that dark room in our inner home, where anything that we don't know what to do with, it feels overwhelming. We weren't shown what to do with this mechanism. We just chuck it in the room and shut the door. Well, eventually, those stifled emotions become an unconscious controller of our entire life, our perception of ourselves, how we believe that we were entitled to live, what we feel like we're worthy of. And from a lower vibrational perspective, it lowers our light quota, but it becomes the scared child within who's afraid of making change. It's the scared child within who is afraid to step into the light because they're afraid of embarrassment or shame or feeling vulnerability. And as an empath, I used to be embarrassed by association or shamed by association. And if you're an empath, I'm sure you can, you know, relate to that idea. I remember being in class and someone getting in trouble, and I was physically feeling it viscerally, like it was happening to me. Had nothing to do with me, but as an empath, I was living the experience like, holy cow, I'm never doing that. And that's just one example. So I was viscerally living by association, other people's in shame, embarrassment, frustration, and somehow putting that within myself, which then created this very limited box that I was like, oh, I can't do that because I don't want to feel this. I don't want to do this because I don't want to feel this. So I lived from a space of fear, and it was through shadow work that it allowed me to embrace myself on the deepest levels and understand myself on the deepest levels. Even I can go back into a year ago, and I pretty much do shadow work every morning. I do about 5 minutes of shadow work where I'll just write, I'll pick a list from my shadow list, and I'll share those in a bit. But I will just sit down with the word resentment and then write down the feelings that come up that I've either felt from the past or felt recently, having to do with resentment. And it's amazing how much clarity you'll gain through this inner investigation of really listening to what it is that you feel, but shining light on the things that you were like, I really didn't realize that was still in me. About a year ago, I was doing, when I was pivoting my business, and, it's like on the logical way, it's like who leaves a business, a practice that they have grown successfully, and is like, I am going to do a hard stop and build something over here. Everyone in my life thought I was bananas for doing so, But the idea of not growing and following my intuition was becoming more uncomfortable than trying to keep fighting what it was that I knew how to do. And in that transition, I realized I never dealt with the shadow parts of my ADHD. Or years ago they called it ADD and I called it angelic divine direction. Now it's a gift, but growing up in a very neurodivergent world, or a very neurodivergent world, yes, it became very difficult to realize that, like, where were all these blocks coming from in me? Like, what was all this fear coming from? What was all this uncertainty coming from? And when I sat down to automatic write, or, inner write, soul scribble, I learned that my ADHD had an entire shadow of closets upon closets of unaddressed emotions that I have dealt with shame in my physical world, but I never dealt with the ADHD shame. I never dealt with the embarrassment of it. I never dealt with the exhaustion of it. I never dealt with the hiding of it. I never dealt with the aspects that it took me 3 to 4 times the amount of time it took someone who didn't have ADHD to do a project. And I didn't deal with the not good enough aspect of it, because when I was growing up, they never talked about this. So shadows come up in many different spaces. And I'm so blessed that I have the tools to navigate that shadow aspect of my ADHD, because jinkies, it was a controller beyond a controller. It was standing in front of every dream I had, because I thought, oh gosh, like, well, if I'm going to be doing this, this is going to expect a lot more of me, to be organized, to be this, to be this, to be this, to be this. And I was like really just shutting down, like, oh, let me just go back to what I know. And through that birthing of those aspects, I realized that, it's my superpower. And if you're struggling with ADHD, or, and people make jokes about it, and, I love the jokes, not in a way of negativity, but like, I'm in the process of working on my t-shirt line called Hanging On by a Thread. And it's tees. And it's basically like for the ADHDer out there who wants to find like some levity in it, because a lot of times people feel like they're alone in things. And when we are, you see a t-shirt that's like anxious all the time, you're going to like, hey, I see you. I know you. I feel you. I got you. We make it less scary or less shameful if we start talking about these things, because again, now I know it's my superpower, but in the process of growth, it was an unconscious block that was really preventing me from stepping up and stepping into my next soul mission. So if you find yourself really getting frustrated with knowing that you're meant to move in a direction, but then when you start to move in that direction, you start getting like all of this self-doubt rushing in, maybe you need to go back in and check in with your shadow and ask what's showing up. Some shadow aspects can be fear, frustration, resentment, greed, jealousy, envy, bitterness. Let's see, what else? Embarrassment. And what you can do is sit there and ask yourself, okay, well, how was I ever shown to feel these things? Was I ever given the guide to feel these things out? And the reality is no. We grew up in a society where that told us to be first, be great, be successful, be this, be this, be this. But no one showed us how to feel. So when you're doing shadow work, I always say, write a list that feels aligned with you. Write a list of all shadows, and then go through and pick one of those shadows out. And when we can meet our fear or meet that shadow, it's no different than a child under the bed being afraid of the monster under the bed or the shadow on the wall. But really, when the light goes on, that goes away. And we start to build things up in our mind to be much bigger than they are. So if you're looking for an exercise, what you can do is just first make peace with yourself and meet yourself where you are right this moment. Ask yourself, what triggers you? And these self-investigative questions are how we connect in with our intuition, because the ego is not activated. We're not being activated by overthinking. We're being activated by our spirit that's trying to lead us to what is creating a blockage. I'm going to be starting a series on mediumship, and it's very important that we address the shadow aspects of it. Not the shadow aspects of mediumship, but the shadow aspects of, if you're a person who wants to connect spiritually with a loved one crossed, our shadow often is what creates the blockages in us receiving. There may be fear, there may be doubt or denial or anger or frustration. And it's not to say that we are, completely releasing those aspects, but it helps just to kind of connect the dots on the map to see where it is that you may be struggling to believe the actual connection is happening. So when you're go through this list, and I love egg timers because I do. I like start dates or start times and end times. I like to know how long I'm committing. And when I set a timer, I usually set it for 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, I will then use it for my soul scribbling time. It is when I just let myself feel without judgment. Write the word resentment, write the word vulnerability, write the word anger, agitation, frustration, irritation, whatever it is that you are feeling. And then just write it out. Don't judge it. Don't reread it. If you're angry at someone, if you feel that someone shorted you or someone could have done better, if a relationship's ending and you're so angry at this other person, then vomit it out right then and there. Do not censor this. This is going to be ugly. It is going to, because this is the stuff that is creating the inner pollution. This is those shadow parts of you that are trying to show up to protect you, because you're not being heard. You need to start listening to yourself before anyone will hear you. And after you've done this, I want you then to crumple it up, shred it, burn it, do whatever it is. Do not reread it. And then I want you to recite the Ho'oponopono prayer. It's a Hawaiian forgiveness prayer. And after you're done, it's a prayer between your soul, source, and your human. And it's, I am sorry, I forgive me, I love me, I thank me. That prayer is so powerful. It is a forgiveness prayer. It is a prayer that allows you to release the heaviness, whether you're carrying guilt or shame or regret or resentment, whatever that may be. This Ho'oponopono prayer is so fantastic because it is such a pure prayer between you, source, and yourself. And that is how we start to allow the light to shine in, diminish the shadow parts, so that when opportunities present themselves, you have a willingness to say yes. If you're out in the world and you feel triggered by someone, by what they say, their actions, their beliefs, because it reminds you of something that you have gone through, it is not that person's responsibility to change or to stop. It is your responsibility to go in and investigate and neutralize that trigger, because how you respond is your responsibility. How they respond belongs to them. And other people's wounds belong to them. They are not meant to be whips that leave marks and scars on us, but it is our responsibility to heal them. And this is how we heal, by asking ourselves, why am I triggered by this? Who does this remind me of? When did I first experience something like this in the past? And when you get these answers, we don't need to keep stories moving around them. We don't need to keep rewriting the same stories that we've already lived. We actually just have to feel it, Sit in it. Allow yourself to breathe through it. If your body has been feeling so tense and tight and really anxious, it's because things are surfacing up that are showing you that you do not need to hold on to it. It is then without the knowledge of knowing that that is showing up because it's meant to be purged. We keep stuffing it down when we keep feeding the story, and we keep feeding it with our thoughts and keep moving backwards instead of allowing ourselves to be in this moment, to experience what's surface and allow ourselves to let it go. So you may find that certain shadow parts need more attention. So I like a rotation for my own shadow work. So I'll sit with shame one day. I'll sit with fear one day. I'll sit with vulnerability. Vulnerability to me was literally the hidden closet of shame, resentment, fear, embarrassment. It could be something different for you. Again, each of our shadow parts is just as unique as our fingerprints because we are the ones that hold them. And each of it has a different attachment as to where it was gathered from. So I am wishing you love on this next week. Practice those exercises in helping yourself to release yourself so that you can create the pages in between for the book you want to live and the book you want to read. I'm Colleen St.Michaels. Have a great day. Thank you for tuning in and joining Colleen St.Michaels on this transformation journey. If you have any questions, insights, or topics that you'd like to engage or ask, please visit www.colleenstmichaels.com under the podcast page of Ask Colleen to submit your question. I look forward to connecting with you next time. Have a beautiful day.